Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on Earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. And before we get into this week's episode, I want to tell you about Higher Energetic Resonance Spiritual Life Coaching. I help visionary women activate their inner power and boldly embody their life purpose. So if you know that you were meant to create something special and you want to break the barriers of your own limitations, I think this could be for you. For more information on that, do click the link in the show notes or contact me on my website, carolmaywhittick.com. This week I have Helen Lim and Cimatu, who are both coaches and co-hosts of their own podcast, Awaken Now What. During our conversation, they share about their own individual awakening journeys and how that shifted their perception of the world. They talk about how they met and then decided to launch their own podcast and the importance of having alternative awakened voices telling their stories. And also we talk about their visions of a new world. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
I feel it when I'm in nature, for sure. That always comes up really prominently, like the feeling of oneness that has resonance for me because of nature we know we're part of. And it feels just like uplifting. And then and being able to move with it. And there's a vastness and expansiveness that comes with being in nature. So nature is when I feel most in highest resonance.
So higher energetic resonance. So when I'm in my own higher energetic resonance, I'm listening to my favorite music. I've picked up DJing as a hobby over the past few years since the pandemic. And when I'm DJing, I feel that energy when I'm just in the flow, and when I'm mixing the songs together, when I'm with my friends having a good time, and there's nothing that we need to worry about the next day. And we're just we're at dinner, we're eating, or we're doing some sort of activity. When I'm meditating, of course, when I'm intentionally trying to raise my vibration, it's really just that it's that feeling, that visceral feeling of you're just in the flow and you're just having a great time. And for that, a big part of me is music and podcasts too. Whenever I'm in the middle of a podcast conversation, you can feel that energy rise from the core of my being, of your being.
Perfect. That's kind of why I like this question, because it's almost like it gets everyone aligned, like those beginning moments where it's just like press play and it's like, okay, right, what we're going to say is like, before you even like tell me who you are or where you're from or what you're doing, think about a time when you're in your best mood, because as soon as you start speaking about it, you have to go there and then we're ready to go forward. And I just always love hearing where it takes people, because I kind of go and journey and kind of imagine where it would be with them as well. So it's like a collective kind of like shift of state to get us ready for the conversation. So that's so perfect. So thank you both for sharing. And then the first question I want to ask, and again, I'll start with you, Helen, is what has your journey been in terms of where were you to where you are now and the work that you did now? What was that journey for yourself?
Oh my goodness. That's a roller coaster journey. So I studied to become a pharmacist. So that's a lot of procedural, analytical kind of thinking and very high achieving, success oriented. And I was also a very obedient daughter and went into pharmacy for my parents. And just very much following the mold that we all understand. So go to college, get a good job, and then even in my love life, just like find the right relationship, get married. But in believing that that was the only way, when the relationship that I was in ended, I was forced into an awakening in the sense of like, what does my life mean? Who am I? And so I just started to try and find answers to those questions or explore what those questions mean. Eventually, I was able to admit that I didn't want to be a pharmacist, which led me to traveling the world for a year. And I went to 19 countries. One of those countries was Peru. So I did an ayahuasca retreat, and that and the frog medicine is really what helped me start leaning into spirituality. And so a year or after I came back, I started to just be more curious about what could be done in the spiritual world. And so working with an energy healer more so, and also already being curious about it since I was doing yoga during the time of my pharmacy school and the breakup for healing, which eventually all brought me to just being full-fledged into it, and then becoming an energy healer myself, and now doing this awesome podcast with JR called Awaken Now What, where we can help people illuminate their spiritual journey. And it's just a continual awakening, I think.
Perfect. And your story, JR, what was that?
Yeah, similar to Helen, I went through a terrible breakup that tore open childhood traumas and wounds, and I was left reeling from it. And it was it was literally I left that relationship basically crawling out, and I was questioning everything. I was questioning my worth, my independence, my life, and then that all led me down a spiritual path. One night I call it a rave club, a dance club. And I was just sitting there listening to music, looking at all the lights. And that was my awakening moment for me. I realized that we are all one, that everything is kind of this projection of one mind. And wow, after that moment, such a huge transformational moment where I just, I wasn't on social media at the time. I didn't know what spirituality was. I didn't know what teachers or gurus were out there. I would just take out my phone. I was crying at night. I'd go to bed crying at night. And then I'd take out my phone and I would start, writing down my thoughts, my epiphanies, my revelations. And I'd do this for about a year just to myself. I kept it all to myself because one, I thought I was crazy. And this was out of the sphere of awareness of, my friends and my family. So I couldn't really talk to them about it. They hadn't gone through it, so they wouldn't really know all the things I was going through. I kept journaling. I kept writing these things down. And eventually, I Googled spirituality, Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles. That was the first thing I Googled on my spiritual journey. And it led me down to a holistic healing center, marketplace store, if you will. And I saw a healer, our good friend Terry Smith, and she gave me a few resources to read. And all of these resources completely validated all of my journalings over the past year. And that's when I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when I said, okay, something's happening to me. I need to investigate this. I need to explore this. And then eventually that led me down to, me wanting to share my voice with the world, me wanting to share my story with the world through our podcast, and, becoming a coach so people don't have to go through this alone. And that's basically my awakening journey.
What was the moment that you decided to create your podcast?
JR and I met in a funny circumstance. I was dating his best friend, and like throughout the whole time I was dating his best friend, I didn't know JR and I had these similar interests or were in the same vibration or level of consciousness. And it wasn't until nearing the end of my relationship with his friend that it happened one night. His friend put on some sort of was it like a third eye opening for us to watch. And then I started like a conversation. Yeah, right. And then I started a conversation I started the topic, and then JR was responding to me. So I got more engaged. And it's funny because his friend, like he shared, his friends aren't spiritual. So that guy I was dating got really like angsty about it. But JR and I were having a grand old time. And so once we realized we had these similar interests, JR sent me his recording session with the galactic historian Andrew Bartis. And I was like, JR, your voice is such a good radio voice. Have you ever thought of making a podcast? And then he bounced it back to me and said, well, how about we do it? And as we were creating it and coming up with the ideas, it was really prevalent that our awakening journeys was the reasons why we had to share more and guide people through theirs.
Anything you want to add to that story, JR?
Biggest, her ex-boyfriend, he got really mad that night. I remember. He associates spirituality with religion, and he's not, completely aware that they're completely different. But yeah, I do remember that night. That was an interesting night. And then over the next few hangouts, we started talking more about, esoterics, spiritual knowledge, and spiritual techniques and tips. So yeah, it was kind of an evolution of our own personal relationship.
Cool. And I suppose as well, like when you've had an intimate relation, or you think is an intimate relationship, and then you realize actually like I've been with this person, but I never really knew them or got them to be so animated and really spoke to them, then that's going to be, a bruise to the ego. Like we're all about ego, right? But it's like, it's one of those things that you can't speak to very many people about and then when you find them, and I think that's one of those things that's been so comforting, especially over the past 3 years where we've really accelerated the awakening, is that people have been able to, use social media, and even though you've had to kind of jump around hoops and censorship and algorithms to connect with people on an even deeper level. Because one thing I'll say that I've found is I started this podcast in 2017, and it was always called Tools for the Awakening, but it was more for women. And even then, it didn't really take on a much deeper meaning until 2020, when I felt like a real acceleration into like a real splitting away of, people who I thought were spiritual, who I thought were awakened. And yet when the world started to really present something real, that's when we really saw what people were made of, no judgment, but, that deeper level of connection that you see something opening, and you see, for me, it was seeing the world change, but then also a real excitement that it's like, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. This is what all of these different modalities, and even to an extent, religion, have been talking about, this shift in the ages. We just didn't realize it was going to happen in the way that it got springboarded. There's been kind of inklings of it, like 2012 and things like that.
2012, right.
Yeah. But this was like a real gear shift for me, seeing like the real shift in awakening, and then seeing the deeper level of awakening souls really come up and really want to have that deeper conversation. How did you see that shift, and how did that kind of change your perception of the people that you were around, but also within yourself, and what you saw that your purpose was in the world? Helen, this
is a really deep question. Wow. So I think on the purpose front, it's been, I'm kind of going through the levels of consciousness, if we will, because there's a part of me that like wouldn't acknowledge it. It's like, oh, there's no way I have those gifts, or that's not possible for me. Right. And then it's like, okay, maybe it is possible. And then that's when like exploring more of the energy healing came up, and really leaning into the yogic philosophies and being just more love and living as love. And then I noticed that the podcast JR and I have is really showing me what it is to live in your purpose, just because of how easy our work is. And when I was hearing you share about your growth of your podcast, there's something magical about the number 3, right? You went from 2017 to 2020, and then you saw this surge, and JR and I are in our 3rd season. And it's something about this, like the creativity that flourishes at the 3, or the representation of the play that comes in. And I find a lot of my purpose is to bring that like joy and play also into this spiritual space. And lucky for me, JR is on that same wavelength.
And how did the shift kind of affect your perspective, JR?
Yeah, so I was noticing these energies around 2017, I believe, 2017. And then it was just very, very different for me. I was observing the people around me, and everyone was continuing to go about their daily lives while I was constantly shifting in consciousness and vibration, and I didn't know how to regulate. I didn't know how to integrate. I didn't know how to manage it. And so like I said, there's a lot of nights crying, a lot of just curiosity learning. I was so curious about the awakening, what it was, about spirituality. So I just dove into the books every night. I would read for hours. And then, as you read, you incorporate more information, which then you incorporate more light into your cellular DNA. And it was just, I catapulted out of this hemisphere. Man, it was crazy. It was such a crazy time for me. And I would try talking to, as these energies were coming at us from the galactic central sun, and even our sun, I was feeling it, and I was absorbing it. And I would try to talk to people around me, my friends, but it was met with, deaf ears. I couldn't talk to them about this. And so it was really trying to hone in on my purpose and my mission, sharpen my own gifts, sharpen my own skills. And that, focusing on my bubble of reality, that was transformational in itself.
You mentioned a word there, integration, and I just want to riff on that a little bit more, because I think what people find hard to balance is going through this awakening, which is a totally personal and insular experience, but we're still on, we're still in the world, we're still in the matrix, we're still on the 3D plane, so we've still got to play the game, right? So it's all well and good, and it's all well and good. Like for me, it's like I can kind of sit in front of my laptop and do a million and different things and work and get work done and like earn. But then every now and again, like I don't have an off-grid vegetable patch in the back garden, so I have to go to the shops to get food. I have to go back into the world to integrate the world. And I do find there are times, especially when I go through periods of like massive shift and learning, and especially I was just telling you recently of just getting rebranding and getting the coaching thing set up. So my mindset and my self-concept has really changed, because I've put on an additional hat, and I've kind of gotten over the I'm like, no, I've made the decision. This is what I want to do. It feels right. So I feel like I'm in a completely space, in a completely different body. It's like a next level me. And then I go out into the world and it's like, oh, is no one else playing? Like, does no one else feel that? Because you just feel that like up level of excitement for what you can create. You want to speak to people about it, but of course they're not like, well, how are you going to do that, and who's going to pay that money? But you just know, you see it so clear. And then, like you say, when you speak to people who just are living the life that has been set out for them, you get up, you go to a job, you don't necessarily really like it, you find something to do on the weekend, and you don't really talk about deep things, but that's okay. And then you're having these really deep unveiling and revealing, and sometimes you're going through the darkness, and then sometimes you're having these high energetic highs, and then you're having downloads, and you're going through all of this stuff. And sometimes you really do want to share, like you appreciate it in yourself, but you do want to share. And then you have to kind of be like, okay, I'm just going to have to pretend that 98% of me it doesn't exist, to integrate. And that can be, I know from my point of view, I can find it frustrating sometimes because I really want to tell a lot of people about what I do. And I know that it's a very narrow band of people who are even interested, let alone whether they will understand it or not in terms of the population. So for yourself, like both Helen and you, JR, how do you manage that when you've had this kind of like blossoming and this massive upgrade and awareness of things yourself, and you're kind of buzzing with it, and then you go out into the world and you're like, oh, like, what am I, you've got to keep it to yourself. How do you manage integrating being here and then having to kind of hold it in a little bit?
I think that I'm good at holding it in a little bit. So that's probably like I have the opposite experience where I need to learn how to let it out more. And then the constant awakenings, I don't know. I think that's why I'm more tired than some people who are like, I need more quiet time. It's like, I'm doing so many upgrades. Don't you guys get it? That comes with being a more reflective person. But I'm at the point now where it's like, oh, like, this is what I'm like, this is why my soul chose this version of expression, and really accepting that the more I awaken and the more I do the work, it's for everyone. And that feels a lot better than just being like, oh, why me?
What about you, Jay?
Yeah. I mean, our podcast is called Awakened Now What? Like you reach this certain level of consciousness. You've accessed this higher level of consciousness. Then what? Now what? We have to learn to approach and navigate every aspect of our lives while having access to this higher level of consciousness. Dating and relationships, work, finances, spiritual practice. How do we go on living? How do we navigate living while we know this deep inner knowingness that we are all connected, that this is all, that separation is an illusion. Really. And that's basically the center of an inspiration for our podcast. How do we navigate this 3D life? Going to work, right? Going to work every day, sitting in traffic, waiting in line at the grocery store. Like, this is not, it was crazy that there's only a few, I mean, actually there's a certain percentage of the earth knows this. And there were times where I'm like, everyone should know this. Everyone needs to know this. And then I realized, at their own time, maybe this lifetime or the next one after that. But what's important now is that I know this. And how do I attain self-mastery on this path moving forward for myself? And how can I be a beacon of light and a voice for others who are going through this? Man, that is such a good question. It's like, navigating the 3D life after the awakening. I mean, it's different for everyone. It's definitely different for everyone.
That's so true. And Helen, what would you say would be the most awakening thing that has awakened you about your awakening? Can I throw it any more times in the question? When you've just been like, okay, I didn't realize it was going to be like this, or how's it changed the way that you see you, that you experience your life, that you experience the world? Has anyone commented back to you, seeing you in an awakened state, and not, maybe not, especially if it's someone who's not to delineate, but who's not on this path, who's noticed something about you and then being like, what's happened? Like, is it the way you do your hair? What is it?
I like that. I do know that after I finished my yoga teacher training, and that was in 2016. So let's say like 2 years after the big breakup, one of my friends I'd known since junior high was like, oh, like you talk different after the yoga teacher trainings. That was pretty fascinating. That's always stayed with me, to see the amount of healing I was able to do in that teacher training. But the most awakening thing of the awakening for me, I think, is, this sounds weird to say, but like how true as within, as without shows up. So it's like really working on my inner state has just changed so much of my outer world. And I can give like 1,000 examples, but just like the nature of the relationship I was with in when I was with JR versus the one I'm in now. My relationship with my parents is completely different, more openness, more love, more acceptance. Like, yeah, as within, so without, like, blows my mind.
Mm. And it's so simple and yet so unsimple.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
of course, like, duh, doesn't it make sense? But then, we spend so long like trying to like go through all the books and want it to be some like complicated, esoteric secret, and it's actually not. What about you? What about you?
State.
What about you, JR? What's the most awakening thing that you have discovered about your awakening?
That there are many awakenings. I mean, Helen mentioned it, that you wake up and you will continue to wake up. There's, waking up from the separation of illusion, or illusion of separation. And then there's waking up to the system of domination and control. Then there's waking up to the massive corruption. Then there's waking up to the lies of big pharma. There's so like, I thought like it was just a one-time thing. You wake up and then you see everything. No, you wake up and then you constantly try to achieve higher levels of awareness. And that continues to happen. And that continues to happen to me to this day. Whenever we have another podcast host on, I'm like, oh, wow, she provided such a great, perspective on whatever the topic was. And it's just, you're continuing to wake up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I had to write a little kind of testimonial about my awakening for a website. My last sentence was, "It's never over. It's never done." And I was like, the editor got back to me and he was like, and I said, "Is it all right?" Because it just didn't really end in like fairy tales and fluffy. Not to say that it's dark. It's just that it's a constant evolution that is probably not going to be completed in this lifetime. But then that doesn't mean that you shouldn't just embark on it. And like you say, there's so many different levels of awakening in terms of like what the state of our reality is, and the deception and the lies and the control. It can be a lot, and it depends how you are able to handle those awarenesses as well, because I can see sometimes why people are reluctant. And especially over the past couple of years, where there was a real mass of people really opening up to what was happening because information was being shared. It just felt like something opened up and everyone was really ready for it. And in a way, there was kind of like this sway towards like an alternative line of like the alternative scene, the truth scene, which 2 or 3 years down the line, I can like awaken to that, to see that it was not all of it had our best interests at heart as well. It was almost like it caught the people that kind of awakened from the mainstream and kind of just pulled them into another pot. And some of it was true and some of it wasn't. And then I'm seeing in that space how people are kind of coming out of that as well, where they're just like, actually, I don't want to look at world events anymore. It's not that I don't care. I'm aware of the corruption of all the systems and all of these things. But now the next thing to do is to pull right out of it and start creating outside of it, instead of waiting for X, Y, and Z to go to jail and all the things that we want to have in terms of justice. It may or may not happen, but like we can sit there waiting for it. But for me, and I don't know how this relates to you, sitting in that space, which was interesting for a while to see all these things kind of split and go separate ways, it becomes too much of a distraction for our energy, especially if we realize how powerful we are. It's like, okay, nothing's happening. People keep saying things are going to happen at certain dates, and we've done that 6 months, a year. It's not happening. It's not going to.
For the past 20 years, they've done that. Yeah,
it's
30.
like it's not really happening, and we're waiting for so and so. And let's just go into this different space. The ones that can really see, the ones that truly understand, to start creating things that will furnish the people who, when they get their awakening, have somewhere to go. But it's true, with the podcast that we have, with the healing and the coaching and all the things that we want to do, to be ready to receive those people when they come to their next level of awakening. It's interesting how tiered it is. You know, it's like, it reminds me, if you've ever seen the scene of where it's the end of the world in Truman's story, or where he's just like the back wall and he's walking up the steps and there's a door. It's almost like there's.
You just ruined the movie for me. I haven't seen it.
Have you not?
It's so old though, right? That movie was like at least 20 years old, right?
Probably, yeah. So it's just kind of talking about, you know, like obviously it's the true man story, but in this reality that's created. But then if you keep paddling, you know, you just kind of hit the scenery, and then you're like, oh gosh, there's a door out of here. It's like that, yeah, you know. But yeah, just that creation of awakened leading the awakened, just coming out of that alternative scene and then creating this completely different scene, which is great because there's a blank slate and all we've got is our intention and our dreams for what we would like to see, away from all of these things that we see are really starting to like completely collapse themselves now, you know. And it's like, who knows what that means? Like, banks are falling, people are being exposed. It's like, what does that truly mean? I mean, what, like, if you were to like envisage the ideal scenario of what you could create in this new space that is being created, because more people's energy is going towards it now, and people are really being intentional with their, okay, we don't want any more of that anymore, and we're going towards this thing that just is empty space, a blank space. What would you like to be able to form in there, in that new space that we're creating, this new world, if you want to say?
It's another powerful question. I don't know that I've given it a lot of thought, but I think when I dream of that new world, I dream of a lot of compassion, because there are so many hurt people. And I recognize that, like, the contrasting experiences of like aggression or force are necessary so that we like understand compassion. But I would like to see the new world led with compassion and not so much of these power structures in the political spheres. And I would love to see not capitalism in this new world. I don't know what that looks like, whether we go back to trades, which would be great, because then we would just be recognizing everybody's contributions in an equal level. But yeah, I feel like our relationship to money, when I say money, I mean it in like currency and notes, needs to be overhauled and redefined. But yeah, this is pretty cool to think of a higher consciousness way to live in a world that is understanding, compassionate, and then like bringing and drawing out the fullest potential in everyone's creator part of themselves.
What are your visions, JR?
When I think of alternative conscious media, I just think of accessibility. I want people to seek this information out and have it be easy to find. More and more people need to create podcasts like these where they're telling their story, speaking their truths, speaking on esoteric, so that more of these people, the mainstream media, when they read this stuff, they think we're crazy. They think we're full of shit. Pardon my French. And when they themselves have been brainwashed by the system. I think we were speaking about the news, and each news corporation can be traced back to Reuters, right? And then Reuters, I think, can be traced to either it's all one big umbrella under Reuters, and it's all owned by, I think you can trace it back to a Rothschild or a Rockefeller, and that is who is funding the mainstream media. When the mainstream media has brainwashed millions and millions of people into accepting this global narrative, you know, of work, eat, sleep, of listen to your government, of, you know, big pharma is the way to health. And when they're presented with alternative news, say in the holistic arena and holistic health or natural healing from the earth, we're looked at as insane, when that is further from the truth. That is further from the truth. So I think of accessibility. I think this needs to be easily accessible to the masses so that they can be better educated, in this subject matter of spirituality or whatever it is within spirituality.
If people understood truly the power of the media over their lives, and how it literally directs just TV and media in general,
everything.
It just kind of catches you on all levels, whatever your interest, wherever you are, it will be controlling you. If you think you're watching entertainment, that's probably when your brain is the most open, because it will just tell, you settle down and go, let me be entertained, and you've got no filter. And the amount of stuff that goes in that just tells you what's possible or what's not possible. And you walk away thinking that you've been entertained, and it's like entertained / entrained. It's like really narrowed your mind into an idea of what's possible. And especially if you watch any kind of media or any kind of, especially the movies, when your eyes are more opened, you can kind of see when they're like trying to like spin a narrative to people, or kind of convince them that up is down and down is up. The power of it is so frightening. And if ever there's ever been any more of an example of that, has been what happened since 2020. You just managed to convince everybody that there was something out there that they should run a mile from, and they're like, look at the TV. I'm like, but look outside of your window.
Right.
Just,
exactly.
like use your own eyes, but they say, but what do you say? What do you feel? Or is it because you've been told and you're being like kept on this, the fear and their ability to convince people that they had no natural immunity. I mean, that was amazing, And
they had no other options, right? They had no other options. You have to do this, this, and this, and this to escape this virus.
And the way that they managed to not only convince each individual, but then to get individuals within households to then police each other. It's like cultish. Like that's the way that cults work. You kind of police each other and keep each other down. And I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and we're kind of speaking about the family and how, but that whole thing, and especially when it came to mask wearing, filtered down to her daughter, who was 5 years old at school. And she was luckily she was strong enough, but she was, even as a 5-year-old, having to stand up to herself against other 5-year-olds about her own decision to not wear a mask. At 5 years old, they managed to just infiltrate every aspect of society. If it wasn't so evil, you'd take your hats, you'd take your hat off to it, because it was like genius.
Right. It was evil genius. It was evil genius because they know how to manipulate us. Right. They know to a T how to get us to do exactly what they want. An interesting story came up. It was back in the 1920s, maybe 1930s. Orson Welles broadcasted, I forgot the name of the program.
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. You know this story. Yeah. Where it was a radio show. It was a radio show where these aliens were attacking America. And the people that were listening, I mean, everyone in that era was listening to the radio, and a lot of people were listening to that. People started running out in the streets, freaking out.
Crazy, right?
Freaking out. I think that's when they knew, the higher ups, the elites, whoever it may be, realized that maybe it was a test, an experiment, which America has been known to do. It was a test to see how much control media had over the population, how much mind control that they had. And so they took that instance and they amplified it throughout the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
And they still do it to this day. And that same method still works to this day. All of TV is broadcasted at a certain frequency. You're at home, you sit down, you watch it, you're in a relaxed state. You almost get into the alpha state, and it puts you in this hypnosis. So whenever you turn on the news, it's really just, it's brainwashing you, people. It is brainwashing you. Yeah. It's just, I have so many thoughts about this, Carol. I have so many thoughts about this.
You and me both. I mean, one thing that I will say is, Yeah, the War of the Worlds. I remember watching, I think it was a movie depiction of it as well, and just be fascinated, going, no way, no, but here we are. So yes way.
Yeah, same thing's happening.
But I think the idea that there is a structure of rule over society, like people can't, whether they want to believe it or not, that, that's silly to say that it isn't, because look, you're being led left, right and center, and no one knows where the order is coming from, but they're all going with it. It's coming from somewhere, because we're not taking it on, we're not taking our responsibility as a mass, we're not taking responsibility. But I think that the idea that a mind can be controlled was knowledge to them prior, because even in our awakening states, and we're learning more and more about our consciousness and how to direct our world and create, we probably still only have like a small percentage of what we're capable of. And the power lies with the people who have the knowledge to create, the knowledge to direct. They know that the minds are susceptible. They know that human beings ultimately are programmable. And if you get them at the right time and at the right frequency, and if you get people traumatized, then like we can still see people walking around still thinking that there's danger in the air 2-3 years later, and they visibly show it to you because they're still wearing the mask. And I saw someone today, bless her heart, and it wasn't even, my heart just went out to her. I'm like, I just can't imagine what state that you're living in, that you still think you need to be going out with plastic gloves on and a mask out. It's just what level of fear, where is your mind? How do you see the world? Because you're still seeing other people, and you see other people, and you see danger and fear, and you're at risk. People are doing so much to stay alive, and yet they're not really living, like not living to the full extent of what's available to us. I mean, how have you seen the after effects of the 2 or 3 years that we've just had? And we're still in a really precarious state. I just don't think we can take the foot off the brake now as well. We have to be like hyper vigilant, which is a lot of energy to be in hyper vigilance, but we just can't go back. Even in our awakened state, we can't go back to sleep just yet. What have you seen that you would add to that?
I've seen both, like more people awakened and more clear of what their needs are or what they want now, a lot of re-understanding of what priorities are. And I also see people who then fell like deeper into fears, like just like you shared, the woman with the plastic gloves. Because they then, whatever trauma they had that they were living in just gets more fed. And especially if they were watching the news all the time, and that frequency is what they downloaded or were programmed into. But I have hope that the more awakenings are what we're moving towards, especially as I think about the younger generations, because I hear so many stories of like, oh, well, if they're not offering remote, I'm not even going to take that job. Whereas I know for like my generation and stuff, it's like, oh, but we're even lucky to have a job. And it's such a different mindset shift now with the younger kids.
JR?
Yeah, the aftermath 2-3 years after. It's 2023, right? That's correct?
Yeah, I know.
Man. So this whole thing started December. Like I remember hearing whispers December 2019, January 2020, I was still going to work. I remember going to work and we had this meeting like, hey, you can go home if you want, but we're still going to work in the office. And this was before the lockdown. This was before that whole thing. Then we all go to work the next day and we get the notice saying, hey, no one come to work. We're all at home. We're all locked up. I think whoever did this whole, massive lie. I'm not saying COVID was a lie. I'm saying it was a real virus. I think the media played it up to be a bigger thing than it was. I think we don't know all the facts. We don't know the true story behind this virus. There is a virus, but we don't have the whole story behind it. And so for me, it's like, yes, we've all kind of gotten back to some sense of normalcy. Just me, this is me personally. I'm curious as to what they're planning next, because it seems like they've exhausted their methods, their techniques, and people are exhausted themselves and have continued on with their normal life. Yeah, to piggyback off of what Helen said, yeah, just hopefully people start to wake up spiritually, and they start to realize the bigger picture of things, and so that they're not living in fear anymore, so that they're living from a sense of self, from a sense of purpose, and hopefully they can take that and really, really, make that a huge transformational phase in their life.
Yeah. I mean, my fingers are crossed for that. But when I see what's happening, like, for instance, I don't know if the story's kind of crossed to you guys, but Matt Hancock, who was one of like the main guys responsible for locking people down and going on TV and literally laughing, talking about how like it was not funny if you saw and he was the one that was promoting the lockdowns, and like he was kind of second to Boris Johnson basically in terms of they'd stand there every evening, and I couldn't watch them. These are the kind of people that in a room full of people you would not know, inconsequential, low aura kind of people, but they're on TV and they're talking this stuff and they've got into the minds of everyone. And it was such a calculated removal of those figures from government. Like, anyone who thinks it's anything other than that, it's like let's kind of realize that we're being shown something to keep us kind of entertained, really, or angry, or pointing the finger at somebody. And so that he resigned because he got caught having an affair with somebody and breaking lockdown rules and all this kind of stuff. But what's happened now? Well, since then, he went on to a reality TV show. So this is someone who's like at the forefront of the corruption. And it's just interesting how people are like, oh, actually, he's quite a nice guy. I'm seeing a human side. And you're like, this is one of your main abusers here. And you're like having like empathy for him, or some weird kind of attachment. I don't even know if it's empathy. And he even said on that program that, they had a load of celebrities in the jungle, like ridiculous program. And they were saying to him, but you broke the lockdown rules. You were, you went and you saw your girlfriend. And he was like, I didn't break any rules. It wasn't a rule. It was a guideline. So he admitted in front of the whole country that what we were adhering to wasn't legal. You hadn't broken the law.
It wasn't.
And the thing, no, because it's a mandate. It's not a law.
Right.
So, and he just went and said it, and everyone just kind of went, oh, I would have been livid, the amount of people that didn't see, I didn't lose anyone through that I'm aware of, but weren't able to see elderly parents or, and parents and people dying in isolation because of these rules. Like, you should be like mad. You should be really upset. And then now what's coming out is that they're dripping the leaked WhatsApp messages where they're seeing him talking about, let's just lay on the fear and let's release another variant. And, this is what's coming out in the news, like mainstream media news. People are not reacting. I think they've got to the point now where they're just are they over it? Do they care? They're just, or they've been so fluoridated, someone was saying about it. They've been so poisoned and so brainwashed down to like not even caring to like stand up against someone admitting that they lied to you, they fooled you, and then they were deliberately trying to scare you. You should be angry, but most people, they're not reacting to it at all, which is mind-blowing. So as much as I want to believe that there will be this like awakening, I think there are some people that I just kind of don't want to take on board the reality of what happened, the fact that there was this deception, that something so enormous could be orchestrated around us and affect our lives to that extent. And then for some people to have made decisions based on that and then lose their health or their lives or other people's lives, the destruction, the reality of it. Because to awaken is to face some really hard truths, to kind of deal with those truths and not be pulled back. takes a strong soul. I want to believe it, but I see that many people don't have it in them to face that reality. I mean, I don't know, what are your experiences of that?
I think that's why us coaches have stepped up, and I see more healers. I mean, I know I'm attuned to it since I'm a working practitioner in that state, but I do find that there are more people wanting to guide and help other souls. And it really does depend on the person if they're ready for, like, I really think it's powerful what you said, that to awaken is to face hard truths, and not everybody's ready to face their hard truths or the hard truths. I'll just keep believing that enough of us are. And I think that enough kind of idea is something that serves our community, because if we're not recognizing and we're also wanting more and more and more, that is kind of the programming that like capitalism or the higher ups want us to feed off of, right? Because that seeking and is a very programmable, easy to attach to kind of energy to feed off of. So yeah, recognizing what enough is and bringing into more availability of coaches and helping anyone ready to awaken or wanting to awaken or curious about it.
Yeah.
Just all the mandates that, people, there are thousands of people that lost their jobs due to these mandates. Now, I won't say the V word because I know that gets a lot of people in trouble, but there are thousands of people that lost their jobs because of these mandates. And then at a certain point, everyone dropped the mandates, but these people still lost their jobs. And these people, I think, are the ones that noticed mostly because it affected them. For the people that didn't focus on it or didn't concentrate on it because it didn't affect them, they're like, okay, the mandates are done. Back to my normal life. Whereas the thousands of other people who were affected financially, who became homeless because of it, I think they noticed the most. And a lot of them, I think they're in the court system now trying to figure this whole thing out. I remember on my spiritual journey, I came across this term, and it was called righteous anger. Righteous anger for the manipulation, for the deception. And then after righteous anger, it goes into forgiveness and boundaries, saying, all right, I forgive you, but this will never happen to me again. I will not let you do this to me ever again. And that's kind of how I see this whole thing. Yes, there should be righteous anger, and then forgiveness, and then drawing those personal boundaries, saying, I don't trust the government. I never will. I will continue to do my own thing. I will, build up my own community and rely on my own services and not rely on this government that has failed me time and time and time and time again. So yeah, the righteous anger, like, all right, it's the F you and no more. And I forgive you.
Do you want to add anything to that, Hen?
I just thought that was good because that relationship with anger, there is a stigma to anger. I think in general, women get taught it's not okay to be angry. And then men get taught like too much anger is like outrageous. And so giving anger its place as righteous anger, I think, is a very powerful thing to recognize.
And I think once you've got past that, the next bigger piece is what you said, forgiveness. It's something that we all have to do. And I can't remember who I was listening to as well, but it was someone's talking about one of the kind of the original New Thought authors. And I was listening to one of their books, and they were talking about just kind of like being free to be able to kind of move into that, just kind of move into that higher space and to be able to live in a more open way. But it was like the originators, like coming back from the Neville Goddard days and like that kind of crew. Like it was but it wasn't Neville Goddard. But one of the things that he had said in his book is this is an exercise that you don't do all at once, because you probably can't do it all at once. Sit down and just make a list of all the people that you need to forgive. Because there's like, even as open and as not holding on to grudges, there's always going to be like a level of resentment or unforgiveness or uncleaning that we haven't done, you know, even if it's that person that when you were like 10 years old and you have that thing and you went your separate way, there's always like a little thread of like a resentment or something, you know, that just even the little hurts that you didn't kind of just in your mind go, okay, I'm over it, it's not so bad, to then the big grudges that you think I'm righteously going to hold on to this till the end, you know, and see what it does. But yeah, forgiveness there's probably hundreds of people that we all need to forgive for varying different levels of grievances. That when we start to look at that and when you really think about that, it blew me away. I was walking when I was listening to it. I'm like, wow, that's kind of true. And then when you actually sit down and think back into like different areas of your life where there's stuff that happened and you didn't really completely clean it out, that there is still a little attachment to something that happened. And it's about freedom. And I think that's where people misunderstand what forgiveness is about, is freeing you from holding on to that level of hold back. Yeah.
When you're attaching to that anger, that resentment, and a lot of people still are because of the effects of the past 2-3 years. I mean, it brings down your higher energetic resonance, and forgiveness releases that energy. And for some people, that is extremely hard to do. And I know myself because I've had to do it. I've had to forgive a lot. But yeah, it really just releases you from that energy, that lower vibrational, lower dense energy.
And you do really feel when you make the move. So before we wrap up, guys, I just want to find out, so where you are with the podcast and plans you've got for the future in terms of where you see it going. And I was grateful that you invited me to be a guest on your podcast, so I'm returning the favor. And it's nice
my God.
Nice
There's
to
so
have
much
you
having
as well.
Yeah, so much fun having you on the show. I keep thinking about that Chat GPT conversation that we had. And that was such a good conversation. It was such a insightful conversation. It was about being this Chat GPT, artificial intelligence, taking away our own creativity and having it do all the work for us. And it was such an enlightening conversation.
It's a fascination to me. It's just because as a creative person, I rely on that connection.
Yeah.
So I will never outsource it, but to just think of all of that generation that's growing up that just sees that, you know, you can just get something to do it for you and come up with, I see all these people in different industries going, oh, Chat GPT will turn you, you know, how to make 10 grand a month with Chat GPT, writing all your stuff, you know. It's like, but the process of sitting down and grinding it out and getting it wrong is what builds that muscle, and then also builds your connection and your trust. If you don't have that, then
you have nothing.
Right.
It builds up your intuition, like you said. I remember seeing a video, and this, I won't name his name because he's a very well-known man. And he was promoting Chat GPT. And I'm not saying Chat GPT is a bad thing. I think it can be used for the greater good, depending on who uses it and how it's taught to people. If we're relying on it for everything, then we're in trouble. But he said, if you're a writer in this day and age, your job is now obsolete. That's what he said.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. To all the creative writers out there, their job is obsolete. That's exactly what he said. And it was just like a punch to the gut. I'm like, ooh, how many people did you just speak to that look up to you, that are writers, who use the creative process to speak on these fairy tales, these stories, to create these stories? It was just like a holy crap moment. Like, this is scary. And for me, I'm a television editor, and I've been editing television for the past decade. And all of my editor friends in the industry says there is no way artificial intelligence could ever take over storytelling. The process of sitting in the edit bay, looking through footage, right? Finding the best takes, finding the correct music to go under the right scene, conveying the right emotion. They say that can never happen. I call bullshit because I think that can happen. I think that technology is out there today. They're just fitting it to us in piecemeal.
Right.
I think there's a scary time technology wise. And I mean, we'll see where it goes, but I mean, hopefully for any writers listening out there,
keep writing.
Keep writing.
Yeah.
Keep writing.
Helen, any last words from you?
I do remember that ChatGPT chat now that you're jogging my memory, and it was just fascinating to think about like the generation of people growing up. Like, as somebody who wants to be a mom, like I'm going to want to make sure there's a lot of intentionality around feeding creativity and the power of creativity and imagination, and not, it's like, I guess then it would be bucking against the grain, because it looks like ChatGPT is just becoming a part of the world.
It's a big one. I don't even know where it's going to be, as like I do occasionally as well do audiobook narration, and I think to a level, I mean, sometimes I can hear it as well. You can hear, because I used to do it in music, so I used to hear the auto tune, and you can kind of turn it up or turn it down, but there's a little kind of catch that you'll hear, that you'll know that even if it's subtle, that something has been laid over. And I can hear it sometimes on, like, if I listen to kind of things on YouTube that have been AI'd, like AI voices, that it'll get to a certain point, and then there'll just be a little pause or nuance that is just not human. Yeah. But that's just the turn of that's just a click of a code to like iron that out. So I think there's many industries that are just like, okay, where like taking away the humanity, but then also that's where the splitting will come. For the people who remember their essence and their connection to spirit, will recognize when they're seeing something, even though the AI is like beyond what we can imagine, even though the deep fakes are amazing, but just still be able to kind of see that there's just like one little thing that that you can't see the humanity in it, and just be able to move away and into that different space. And unfortunately, some of our brothers and sisters will get captured within that, and that's the harder part, but you can't get people to see through your own eyes, because this is it's not just your eyes that are seeing, it's your soul, it's your heart, it's everything that's looking. But you need to have that kind of communion in order to recognize it. So yeah, technology, we love it because this is what we do. Right. But then we're like,
blessing and a curse.
Absolutely. But I just want to say thank you so much for like granting me your presence on Her Conversations. It's been fantastic. And can you just let everybody know where they can connect with your podcast and everything else that you're doing in the world?
So our podcast is called Awakened Now What? You can watch the video podcast on YouTube and on our YouTube channel and Spotify, and the audio versions are available on all other major podcast platforms. For individual coaching with me, I'm a spiritual awakening coach. You can find me at journeythroughtheawakening.com.
And I am a energy healer and holistic health coach, and I take direct emails at helen@helencoaches.com. Also, you can find us on Instagram. Our handle is Awaken Now What.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun, Carol.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, JR, for joining me on this conversation. It was great to have you on this platform, and also I'll be telling everyone about the episode that I did with you when that comes out. Once again, if you're looking to work with me on the spiritual life coaching, please feel free to use the link in the show notes or contact me at my website, carolmaywhittick.com. carolmaewhittick.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Kazmic, CAZMICK, and also on Facebook, Carol May Whittick. Keep listening, because next week there will be a launch of something fantastic and new that I'm working on as we speak. Also, a reminder that Her Conversations has a sister podcast, Her Inspirations, which is a weekly look at a multitude of topics from both a psychological and a spiritual perspective. And then with each episode, I end with a practice, a meditation, a breath work, and a visualization practice. If you're listening to this on Apple, both of my podcasts now sit under the channel Her Podcasts. On other platforms, you'll need to search that out individually. It's Her Inspirations. Until the next time, thank you.